Thanks for joining me today, Tamisha Walker. Can you tell me a bit about yourself?
Hello, my name is Tamisha Torres-Walker. I am a Antioch resident. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of Safe Return Project, which is a grassroots community-based organization here in Contra Costa County that is committed to criminal justice reform.
Awesome. How long have you been living in Antioch?
We just hit 5 years in February.
Awesome. What neighborhood are you in, and what are some of your favorite parts about your neighborhood?
Yeah, I live on Cavallo
Hmm.
and Gary, so it's in between East 18th and East Douglas.
Okay, over by Sunset, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
familiar with the location over there. If you could change
Um,
one, oh, go ahead.
you said, what do I like to do in my
Uh,
neighborhood?
exactly.
I Well, for the last 5 years, we've been a commuter family, like a lot of families who move here.
Hmm.
And so mostly what I like to do is hang out with my family in the backyard. I have a granddaughter, and just whenever we can be home, just try to make home homey like. And I've been like connecting with different friends to try to like find all of the parks or open spaces.
Hmm.
Over here, there aren't any. And so mostly I'll get took to the other side of Antioch and everything like that. So every time I try to find something to do, there's nothing here in my neighborhood. So
Yeah, that is a problem over in the Cavallo area, I've noticed. If you could change one thing in your zoning, what would it be and why? Would that be one of the things that you would want to change?
yeah, I was just talking to another resident today about, could we do a park survey? Is there already a park survey? How do we look at like city planning and zoning? Maybe even like, does the city have a 10-year plan? And like, does that include more open space, more
Mhm.
parks, and things for this particular community over here? So I think that's something that I would like to see.
Awesome. If elected, what three steps would you like to take to put our city on a firmer financial footing?
One of the one of the things is that I would do is like try to figure out if there's any wasteful spending.
Hmm.
Because I know when we do a lot of justice reinvestment work as a community organizer, we always find out where there's waste and like how we can divert that back into the community, especially if it's in like higher salaries, right? So like Richmond city manager was like one of the highest paid city managers in the country,
Hmm.
and like just really high paid staff and overhead. So looking at where wasteful spending has happened will be one thing. I would definitely look at the like it's no joke, we are spending a lot of money on law enforcement. And so just taking a look at that 65% of our general funds or more that goes to straight to the police department, that
Hmm.
shouldn't that but being clear, like that doesn't include fire, you
No.
know, or like EMT, like that, making sure that doesn't include anything other than the police department and finding out where we could trim the fat there. And then like the third thing would be to try to identify what our revenue streams are. And if we need to, like, how do we acquire more revenue streams to be able to increase enough of the general fund to put more resources back into the community.
Awesome. If you received a 1 million grant to use for the city any way you wanted, what would you do? What would you do with it and why?
Not clearly, because a lot of people don't know me. I would definitely invest that in youth development and job training programs, as much of it as possible. Like $1 million might seem like a lot of money, but it's really not. So you have to be very strategic about how you would use that. And if I had it my way, I would use it for economic development, like job training, workforce development for young folks, young Black folks, young other POC communities, and youth development, youth leadership, and figure out how we can partner with other organizations to do that.
Awesome. What's your stance on police reform and defunding?
I'm always, I mean, I've been a big supporter of police reform. I think, like, honestly, to be honest, I
No,
don't
but be
believe,
honest, as
I mean, I don't want to, like, we can play politics all day, but the reality is that I don't believe systems like this could be reformed. So, and then people find me kind of weird because I'm not an abolitionist, but I'm also not a reformist. And so it's just
somewhere
kind
in
of
the in
like,
between.
who is she? What is her deal? I think for me that 21st century community policing only worked for a while. It only works when you have like a police chief or a leadership who is willing to hold the line accountable, meaning taking the risk and firing officers who should not be in the department, making sure that we review hiring, training, practice, and equipment. So I think that, like, I'm all for defunding law enforcement, which is really just a justice reinvestment strategy to make sure that we're actually doing public safety in a way that actually gets to the root cause of violence and not over or under policing communities that need it the most.
Exactly. Thank you for that. What would you do to help solve the homeless problem?
So I've been thinking about this. It's so hard because when I think about unhoused folks or the homeless, we don't think about the fact that working families are now homeless, right? Because rents are too high, and they can't afford to live anywhere. So you have whole families living out of cars, getting up and going to work every day. And then you have our homeless population that suffers from mental health and substance dependency issues and are simply on the street because we don't have the capacity to do mental health and substance dependency treatment well. And then we often criminalize those populations. So I think not being like a clear homeless, like a homeless advocate and not having all the knowledge, would try to figure out what is the need, the additional need to housing? Where can we partner with different organizations, institutions, and models that are providing housing for the unhoused community? How do you, like, there in Oakland, they actually have a whole entire unhoused community where they are getting land and their own land and developing their own communities. And that land is supposed to be like gifted to them by the city. And so thinking about working with folks like that from Oakland who have these ideas around how do you, like, acquire more housing? Do we build more housing? Do we access housing that's not available? Is it rent control? Is it just cause for eviction? So doing some real deep thought around how we can get the homeless housed, but housing is not enough without resources and services.
Awesome. I also had some additional questions from a group that wanted to ask. If elected into Antioch City Council, what changes would you implement for a city in regards to our current COVID-19 reaction, especially in terms of retaining small local businesses in distress, rent mortgage deferment, and evictions soon to follow, homeless protection, and mask requirements? There's a lot to go with it.
Right. So the first one was like small business suffering currently as a result of COVID-19.
Yes.
Like, for me as a community organizer and a researcher, I would have to know what the small business community wants to do and see happen. I definitely think that there could be small grants potentially, loans. Like, what can we do with small businesses staying within the parameters of public safety during this COVID-19 moment, where small businesses don't, get shut down, can still pay their rent, at some rate could still retain staff, that especially good staff, and continue to make some source of revenue.
Mhm.
I would go to that community and talk about like how do we make that happen and keep everybody safe at the same time.
Okay.
The other part of the question
Was rent
was
mortgage deferment and eviction soon to follow?
rent, mortgage deferment, and evictions.
Yeah.
So I've been following this. I'm a homeowner. I was a renter for many years. I was also on low income housing subsidies for many years. So I know what it's like to be a renter. As a young person, I was also homeless for a lot of years. So I know what it's like to be unhoused. I know what it's like to be a renter and be rent gouged by your landlord. And I know now what it's like to be a homeowner. I think I'm very concerned about people being evicted after the rent deferment is over. That is a big thing that I'm worried about. And is there a process to do rent forgiveness programs and also meet the needs of homeowners who also have to cover their mortgage? I think we have to think about everybody, the renter and the homeowner, and not just the renter or just the homeowner. And like
Exactly.
I'm talking about this, I'm talking about if I own one or two properties and I'm trying, and that's like an extra income for me. I'm not talking about big developers with
Yeah.
like 80 to 100 units. Like I'm not talking about
I'm
those
talking about the
folks.
mom and pops, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Out of the current city council members for Antioch, who do you feel your opinions and policies would mostly align with?
Now, whoever asked that, no, it's a loaded question. I didn't I didn't answer the other question about mask regulations and all
Oh,
of
I
that.
forgot about that. I'm sorry.
I don't really know. I think we need more public education. I don't know how much we could actually do. Everybody doesn't have access to all information. Some communities need to be provided protective gear and more education and support. And there's honestly, there are just going to be some people who believe that it violates their rights, right? And we can't do anything about that. I'm not a big supporter of fines and fees. I'm not even going to lie to you because I know the impact that can have, and it can also lead to criminalization and credit devastation. So I would not be a big supporter of fines or fees, but definitely of public education and providing people the equipment that they need to be safe, for sure. I don't know if it was another part of that, but that was a long question. Whoever asked that, they did a good job.
My wife, she's I'll give her credit. I think
Okay,
the
now
other thing was homeless protection, but the Motel 6 operation, I'm guessing, is going to be another big stance of yours, or
this whole bridge housing idea, and I still have to look more into that, and putting unhoused people in hotels and hotel rooms is a band-aid. It's a temporary fix. It should never be permanent. I lived in hotel rooms for a great part of my life as a young adult, and it's no way to like live. Even especially if you have small children, which remember, like we said, not every homeless person is a non-working person, and some homeless people are like whole families are homeless. So that's a temporary fix. And we should be thinking more with our county housing agency and thinking more about any development that's happening about low income housing or housing subsidies, or even, find rental units and create a rental assistance program. And we put families and working folks in there, help them with their rent for amount of time to be able to get on their feet is also potentially an option. And for people with mental health and substance dependency issues, we should find transitional housing opportunities that also include resources and permanent housing to follow.
Okay. We got a last one, last question for tonight. What is your opinion of the APD surrounding the community's concern over hiring practices, budget use of lethal methods, implication of non-lethal methods, and expanded public knowledge of its use, and ad hoc committees?
Right.
That's a long one, I know.
I think I'm all for educating the public. I'm all for educating the public. But what I will not do and what I cannot be a part of, just because I've done a lot of work with law enforcement over the years, by the way, and especially work closely with law enforcement in the city of Richmond to reduce violence and improve community relationships. But what I never did was committed to put community in a position to have to understand what police go through every day, especially when communities go through a lot every day as well. So law enforcement need to understand what the community is going through and be ready to operate in a way that's conducive to knowing that you're in an environment filled with pain and trauma. And you're either over policing or you're under policing vulnerable communities, and either one of those is not good. So when you talk about public education, helping people understand what's non-lethal, the daily operations of a police department, that's all great, and it's all lethal to me. I mean, even when we look at tear gas, I feel that's lethal. Bean bags, that's lethal. Like any use of force, whether lethal or non-lethal, is unacceptable. And I think that we should, yes, we can do public education, but we also have to set the standard on what we will allow. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing. And I think there was another part to that.
Non-lethal, public knowledge of its use, and ad hoc committees.
So ad hoc committees, I'm gonna tell you one why ad hoc committees are good, and one why I don't always agree with ad hoc committees. Okay. Ad hoc committees are often helpful with getting the community in the room with elected representatives and other people in the community to talk about the issues that's impacting them the most. And it may or may not lead to public policy at all. It might not even lead to impacting or affecting the budget. And what could happen is, in ad hoc committees, the community could get burned out from having the same conversation over and over again and not seeing any change, because that's all an ad hoc committee is the discussion.
Mm-hmm. It's the educational process.
Right. And maybe that's the first step, right? Is an ad hoc committee. But if it's an ad hoc committee for 10 years running, then we have a problem. If no public policy is changed, if no accountability is implemented, if there's no impact on the budget, then it's just a group of people having a conversation about problems. I prefer more established, like task forces, any body that has to fall under the better government laws and the Brown Act. Anybody with some authority or power, any structure with some authority or power, is what I'm more for. So like oversight committees, commissions, and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, that was just my last question. I'm just gonna make sure that everybody knows that you're running for District 1 in Antioch. And do you have anything else you want to plug tonight? Do you have any other upcoming events or?
Well, I'm super excited. So I am Tamisha Torres-Walker, and I am running for Antioch City Council District 1. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to the community, get out there, figure out what folks want to see in District 1. Super excited. I only needed 20 signatures to qualify, and I have 30. And so now I'm ready to move forward and be a viable candidate. More is coming, website launching, donate page. If you want to support, how can you volunteer? That's all coming soon. But for right now, what I would just say to folks is don't, stay woke. Don't miss a city council meeting if you could help it. Don't miss a school board meeting if you could help it. And don't forget that what happens at the level of the county also impacts our community. So if you could get a lot more educated on what's happening at the county level, then that's important advocacy as well. So I would just encourage everybody to just keep organizing, keep doing what you're doing, keep standing in their faces. And somebody said, who has collective values with me who currently sits on the council? I would say I'm not sure we have there's any collective values at this point. I would say that I'm willing to work for anybody for change for the city of Antioch. And as long as we can find an intersection where we could create that significant change, then I'm happy to do so. And so if you want to see change in Antioch, then this November, vote for me, Tamisha Torres-Walker, for Antioch City Council District 1, the choice for change.
Also want to plug something myself. There's going to be an event coming up for young voters to get a chance to register. JAR is going to be producing it. I'll be sending out the flyer with information of that. But yeah, we're going to invite a bunch of candidates out to speak on behalf of themselves. So I hope that you can make it out and talk to us.
I hope that
the schedule aligns for
right.
you to do so.
I hope I'll be able to make it out too. Also call your supervisor, Diane Burgess. Tell her to close down the juvenile hall.
Will do. Thank you for joining me tonight.